distinguished representatives of the United Nations,
中非合作将迎来又一次盛会。
Please welcome Professor Justin Linyifu.
发展经济，创造就业，提高人民收入水平。
That China-Africa cooperation will make significant strides and have a bright future.
Le rapport et le fruit de mon travail de
for fast recovery of Africa's economy.
In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic,
African products to the Chinese market.
Let's move forward together for shared prosperity.
But I would argue this is the most comprehensive report on China-Africa economic relations.
和非洲一起走向世界。
我们在非洲投入了感情，投入了时间。
And we're working with and communicating with many Chinese businesses.
中非的合作重在民心。
在实现环保的同时呢，使非洲国家的用电的费用减低了。
Redéfinir sa trajectoire et être consciente de ses atouts et de ses faiblesses.
那么在非洲呢，我们是主要干的活就是帮助非洲去改善它的数字设施。
I do hope the rest of the summit goes extremely well, and I'm sure we'll be having some very exciting conversations as part of it.
To collaborate and drive the China-Africa trade corridor.
改革开放40多年，中国经济的体量快速的扩大，成为世界第2大经济体。
China invested, of course, in business capital, and a lot of that business capital is now investing in Africa.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish the meeting very good success.
Needs quality partnerships to drive lasting reforms and changes. Thank you all again for supporting our launching ceremony.
设立中非民间投资促进平台。
distinguished representatives of the United Nations,
中非合作将迎来又一次盛会。
Please welcome Professor Justin Linyifu.
发展经济，创造就业，提高人民收入水平。
That China-Africa cooperation will make significant strides and have a bright future.
Le rapport est le fruit d'un travail de qualité.
For fast recovery of Africa's economy.
In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic,
African products to the Chinese market.
Let's move forward together for shared prosperity.
But I would argue this is the most comprehensive report on China-Africa economic relations.
和非洲一起走向世界。
我们在非洲投入了感情，投入了时间。
And we're working with and communicating with many Chinese businesses.
中非的合作重在民心。
在实现环保的同时呢，使非洲国家的用电的费用减低了。
Redéfinir sa trajectoire et être consciente de ses atouts et de ses faiblesses.
那么在非洲呢，我们是主要干的活儿就是帮助非洲去改善它的数字设施。
I do hope the rest of the summit goes extremely well, and I'm sure we'll be having some very exciting conversations as part of it.
To collaborate and drive the China-Africa trade corridor.
改革开放40多年，中国经济的体量快速的扩大，成为世界第2大经济体。
China invested, of course, in business capital, and a lot of that business capital is now investing in Africa.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish the meeting very good success.
Needs quality partnerships to drive lasting reforms and changes. Thank you all again for supporting our launching ceremony. Distinguished representatives of the United Nations,
中非合作将迎来又一次盛会。
Please welcome Professor Justin Linyifu.
发展经济，创造就业，提高人民收入水平。
That China-Africa cooperation will make significant strides and have a bright future.
Le rapport est le fruit d'un travail de qualité.
For fast recovery of Africa's economy.
in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic,
African products to the Chinese market.
Let's move forward together for shared prosperity.
But I would argue this is the most comprehensive report on China-Africa economic relations.
和非洲一起走向世界。
我们在非洲投入了感情，投入了时间。
And we're working with and communicating with many Chinese businesses.
中非的合作重在民心。
在实现环保的同时呢，使非洲国家的用电的费用减低了。
Redéfinir sa trajectoire et être consciente de ses atouts et de ses faiblesses.
那么在非洲呢，我们是主要干的活儿就是帮助非洲去改善它的数字设施。
I do hope the rest of the summit goes extremely well, and I'm sure we'll be having some very exciting conversations as part of it.
To collaborate and drive the China-Africa trade corridor.
改革开放40多年，中国经济的体量快速的扩大，成为世界第2大经济体。
China invested, of course, in business capital, and a lot of that business capital is now investing in Africa.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish the meeting very good success.
Needs quality partnerships to drive lasting reforms and changes. Thank you all again for supporting our launching ceremony.
各位领导、各位来宾，请就座。
Distinguished guests, please have your seats. Our forum is going to begin.
我们的发布会马上开始，让我们欢迎
The launch ceremony will start soon. Let's welcome Ms. Sandy from CEBC to be the moderator of the forum. Let's give her a big hand.
Distinguished Excellencies, ambassadors and officials representing African countries to China, distinguished Excellencies from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Commerce, distinguished representatives of enterprises, academia, and those who are joining us online, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launching ceremony of the report on Chinese investment in Africa, China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective. The first report on Chinese investment in Africa, released by China-Africa Business Council during FOCAC 2021, demonstrated facts, insights, and suggestions on Chinese enterprises' interactions with Africa, and was well received in both China, Africa, and the rest of the world. This year, focusing on Africa's supply chain development, CABC, with a great contribution from Development Reimagined, compiled a report on Chinese investment in Africa titled Chinese Investment in Africa, China-Africa Cooperation from a Supply Chain Perspective. This report, featuring trade statistics and specific examples, serves to guide future China-Africa economic cooperation and support independent and sustainable development of Africa. This afternoon, we are joined by a very wide range of participants, government officials, heads of leading enterprises, as well as scholars and experts on China's engagement with Africa. We'll get to hear speakers from China, Kenya, Ethiopia, Benin, Malawi, Nigeria, and so on, reflect and exchange on this important topic. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our very first speaker to open today's ceremony, Mr. Eric Hong Xiaoyong, who is the Vice Chairman and Secretary General of China-Africa Business Council. Please welcome Eric.
Your Excellencies Wu Peng, Wang Dong, and Your Excellencies Ambassadors Osman, Kashmir, Simon Pierre, Alan, and Ambassador Mary from Kenya. Good afternoon. Now, we also welcome Ms. Song Wei from China Africa Foundation and respected Xi Shuwei and Sun Hongyu. And at this moment, we'd like to give one welcome to all of the entrepreneurs, academic institutions, media organizations, and friends online. Good afternoon. On behalf of the CEBC, I would like to begin with a warm welcome to all of you attending the launching ceremony of the report on Chinese investment in Africa 2022. Thank you for your attention to the support and your support for China-Africa private economic cooperation. The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation was held in Dhaka at the end of November 2021, releasing the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Dhaka Action Plan. The action plan proposed that China will regularly publish the report on Chinese investment in Africa by publishing China-Africa economic and trade data, analyzing enterprise investment cases, summarizing China-Africa investment cooperation experience, and putting forward suggestions for future cooperation. China will navigate enterprise to increase investment in Africa and support African independent development. Therefore, following the release of the first report in 2021, with the support of the Department of African Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, will focus on China-Africa enterprise cooperation from a supply chain perspective this year, and invite African think tanks, Chinese academic institutions, African embassies in China, Chinese and African enterprises, and other parties participated. According to our statistics, a total of more than 600 experts, entrepreneurs, envoys, corporate employees, and college students participated in the compilation interviews and case studies of the report. In particular, following suggestions of Mr. India, the then Senegalese ambassador to China at the conference last year, we invited 6 local African experts and scholars as core members of the report writing team to participate in research and editing of the report's about the process. Continuing the characteristics of the first report, this report will focus more on the research on enterprises in China and Africa. In this report, we introduced a total of 119 Chinese and African enterprises and introduced a cooperation between China and the African enterprises in the field of supply chain. And we also have proposed 5 key drivers of supply chain development in Africa, and 5 attractions and 4 challenges, and 8 cross-cutting actions. And what will be the 5 attractions? They are the continent's growing population, the world's fastest growing market, the world's fastest growing youth group, the existing global investment in supply chains, and last but not least, a booming mining industry in the African continent. Well, what about the 4 challenges? They are disease challenges, regional conflicts, logistics blockage, and global events. Now, what are the 8 cross-cutting actions are? They are tariff barriers and non-tariff trade barriers need to be addressed to boost the intra-regional economy. The second will be localize the supply chains in resource-abundant regions and to increase the high-value products. Third, improve the quality of continental and regional infrastructure to promote economic development. Fourth, promote the development of local manufacturing capacity. Fifth, foreign firms need to be complement and not compete with the local companies. Sixth, increase training centers and empower more local involvement in supply chain. And seventh, provide better financing to African firms to ensure equal access to financing avenue. Last but not least, adopt more digital solutions for supply chain growth in the African continent. According to the report, in the 8 cross-sector actions of supply chain development in Africa, the Chinese central government, local governments, and Chinese enterprises have launched relevant policies, carried out China-Africa local cooperation, and made contributions from the 10 cooperation plans of Johannesburg Summit in 2015 to the 8 major actions of the 2018 Beijing Summit. All have achieved fruitful results. China has become Africa's largest trading partner and the 4th largest investor in Africa, and just held the Dakar conference of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation put forward 9 programs and Cooperation Vision 2035, which will further promote the cooperation, enhance Africa's capacity for independent development, and attract more Chinese enterprises to invest in Africa. Local cooperation between China and Africa, such as Zhejiang Africa, Guangdong Africa, Hunan Africa, Suzhou Africa, and etc. All of these have become a positive force for the sustainable growth of China-Africa cooperation. According to the analysis of the report, through the practical cases of 12 Chinese and African enterprises, Chinese and African enterprises are promoting the development of supply chains and industrial chains in the 5 sub-regions of Africa. And all of these have provided references and experiences for the further cooperation in the future. And finally, the report draws 6 conclusions for supply chain development in Africa and puts forward 3 key recommendations for China and 32 specific recommendations for Chinese and African stakeholders. Later, my colleague will also make specific reports on the relevant content of the report. And we are looking forward to your suggestions and recommendations for improvement in our follow-up work. Here, I would like to thank the Department of African Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, the Department of Western Asian and African Affairs of China, and all China Federation of Industry and Commerce for their support to our work over the years. Thanks to the African embassies and councils in China for recognizing our work. Thank you for your trust in our work. And thank you, entrepreneurs. Thank you, think tank scholars, for helping us in our work. And I would like to thank the media friends to cover our events and our launching ceremony. The CEBC will continue to adhere to the concept of respect culture, combine generosity and profit women cooperation, and fulfill the 6 missions of our CEBC. And last but not least, I would like to say that next year's report will be more successful and fruitful. And I hope that our next year's report will give you further and better reference. And today we gather here, and I'm looking forward to your insights and your direction for our future cooperation. And now, throughout the whole country, a lot of places are suffering from the hot weather, and I hope that we can have a bright future in both China and African cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Next, we'll make a very brief introduction of the report. This segment will begin with a short video and will be followed by a presentation by myself. feel like the video was actually quite explicit, but I will go ahead and I'll continue to share more information. So here's an overview of just this brief presentation. So number one, why put together such a report? The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation held in Dakar, Senegal in November 2021 adopted a series of documents, including the Dakar Action Plan, and indicated that in the action plan that China will publish a report on Chinese investment in Africa on a regular basis. The report, produced by China-Africa Business Council and Development Reimagined, aims then to analyze Africa's supply chain, including its historical development, the current status, the challenges it faces, and how it interacts with the rest of the world. But why supply chain? Supply chain development in Africa is essential for the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but also the Africa Union's Agenda 2063. The continent offers vast opportunities for development partners, including China, to invest deeply in improving Africa's supply chain and thereby contribute to the economic and social development of the continent, the African continent. So although there are various global definitions of supply chains, there are 5 key drivers for analyzing supply chains in Africa, and these include production, inventory, location, transport, and information. So now what will you find in this report? The report uses a 3-step framework to analyze Africa's supply chain and the role of Chinese stakeholders in addressing the supply chain challenges on the continent. So there are 3 highlights. The first highlight is that the report offers a historical development of Africa's cross-regional supply chains. Secondly, the report examines the contribution of the Chinese government and Chinese businesses to supply chain in Africa. Thirdly, the report aims to shed more specific light on the kind of role Chinese businesses have played and have potential to play in supply chain development across the continent. So here are some key findings on each highlight. In terms of historical development, Africa has been particularly slow to date, primarily due to the impact of colonial institutions and trade patterns. However, when examined on an empirical basis, Africa is actually a very attractive market and location for manufacturing and e-commerce for development partners, including China, in particular because of its growing population market and abundant resources. But of course, current challenges such as COVID-19, regional conflicts, and the ongoing war in Ukraine at the moment reveal the limitations of Africa's supply chain patterns and thus increase the incentive to improve the supply chain in the 5 identified areas. In terms of the second highlight on China's contribution to Africa's supply chain, the report finds that Chinese stakeholders have financed, been commissioned to, and invested in infrastructure, trade, manufacturing, and other industries crucial to supply chain management in Africa. China has remained the largest bilateral trading partner of Africa for 13 consecutive years and is currently Africa's largest bilateral investor. Chinese provinces such as Zhejiang, Guangdong, and Hunan are also key drivers at the local level to support Africa's supply chain development. Lastly, in terms of the role of Chinese businesses, the profiles and case studies demonstrate that Chinese businesses are developing Africa's supply chain across the 5 pillars of the ecosystem that we've just mentioned. They are actively seeking ways to address some of the existing challenges, for example, employing local workers and using training and skill transfer schemes. However, Chinese businesses still have many hurdles to overcome including building closer links with domestic enterprises in Africa and linking into and leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area and other African Union plans. Next, we will we also highlighted the 8 cross-cutting areas of action. Actually, Eric just mentioned them just now, so I won't have to read that out loud, but these were some of the very key findings that the report came across. Finally, we also highlight recommendations. To conclude, the report uses a 3-step analysis to provide a detailed set of specific recommendations to Chinese and African stakeholders based on 8 cross-cutting areas for Africa's supply chain development. In total, we have 32 recommendations, very lengthy, and here are just a couple of examples that we can pull out. So for Chinese stakeholders, for instance, official and private financial investment institutions, as well as private investment, should promote from China that play a more significant role in directing capital flows to Africa. Secondly, Chinese partners must work even harder to intentionally integrate more fully into the African supply chains and African ambitions for its supply chains and development plans, especially through local partnerships. For African stakeholders, we advise to coordinate business-friendly economic policies that are attractive to supply chain players, such as preferential policies for exporting value-added and processed goods. Secondly, when supporting regional infrastructure projects, we advise to clearly communicate Africa's needs and expectations for Chinese activities, namely local employment, environmental and social responsibility, etc. In the end, we wanted to show how the report was put together. So here we have China-Africa Business Council, who was in charge of generating, coming with the concept and coordinating the putting together production of this report. We were joined by Development Imagine, who are a team of researchers and writers. Member companies that were highlighted in the video, we saw a list of the companies. They made the key 11 examples that are provided in the report. The one other company is an African enterprise. And finally, we have received a lot of external contributors, including African ambassadors that were willing to contribute their thoughts and insights, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Commerce, and other partner organizations. Thank you for listening. So I just mentioned the report received a lot of support from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And today we're honored to be joined by Mr. Wu Peng, who is the Director General of the Department of African Affairs at the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please welcome Mr. Wu Peng.
Your Excellencies and colleagues, as the Secretary Wang Xiaoyong, as dear experts, scholars, and entrepreneurs, dear friends, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very glad to be here to attend this event. So I remember in the last year, I have the very amazing experiences about the emotions for the last year's report in this field. So today, it is the pleasure to attend today's event and witness the release of the Chinese investment in Africa 2022. So this kind of the report has been released for the consecutive years, and this year's theme, that is the China-Africa cooperation from the perspective of the supply chain, is very much in line with the current situation as the key direction of the China-African cooperation. I read through the full context of the report carefully and was deeply inspired. The supply chain is the area of the economic and social development with the resignation of the epidemic as the game of the great powers, as the superposition, as the resonance of the regional conflicts, the global industrial chain plan has been seriously impacted. Africa's infrastructure is difficult. Logistics and circulation are difficult at the same time. Its supply chain system is becoming more and more fragile, underscoring global challenges and situations. As the economy and people's livelihood are facing great challenges. However, in the long run, Africa is still a continent full of hope. Its resource endowments, demographic dividends, and other latecomer advantages continue to emerge. Its later stages of development and its development potential is gradually released. Africa's share of the world's population expected to increase from 14% today to 22% by 2050. With a high proportion of the young people as abundant labor force. The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to build a unified market covering the population of 1.3 billion people and a total of economic volume of the $3.4 trillion, which will accelerate the integration of the Africa's industrial chain supply chain as the regional economic integration, stimulating the fabulous driving forces for Africa's development, and also give China-African cooperation greater development questions. In fact, as more we understand Africa, as more optimistic we will be about Africa's development prospects from the bottom of our hearts, as believe that Africa will achieve.
In recent years, China-Africa high-quality joint construction of BRI has brought opportunities by China for the development of Africa's industrial supply chain. Despite COVID-19, China-Africa trade has steadily increased, and China has remained Africa's largest trading partner for 13 consecutive years. Since the 8th FOCAC Ministry Conference in 2021, China and Africa have steadily promoted the implementation of the forum's initiatives, including the Green Channel for the import of African agri-products to China. And we also have signed in seven African countries, the Green Channel have been opened, and the 9 agricultural products access to the Chinese market have been approved. And I know the Tanzania's products have been approved, and in the last week, the consensus has been reached. And for the qualified enterprises, the relevant registration application work has been conducted. In the first half of 2022, China-Africa trade volume increased by 70% year-on-year, of which China's imports from Africa increased by 20% year-on-year. South Africa's wine, Senegal's peanuts, Ethiopia's coffee, more and more African specialty goods are entering the Chinese market. And now, present in this launching ceremony, the first batch of fresh avocados officially exported from Africa to China, packed and shipped at the Sunrip factory in Lumuru town, Kenya. And after arriving at Shanghai seaport, and they will be sold to Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou and other cities. And I believe they will be soon be on all of our tables. And this is a milestone of China's import of fresh fruits from Africa, for which both Chinese and African customs and other relevant departments, as well as Shanghai Great Chain Company and other enterprises have made long-term efforts. I know the high executives, the CEO from Green Chain, have been present at this conference, and I really appreciate your effort. And despite the efforts made by the relevant authorities, and I believe that the enterprises have been playing a key role in building the bridge between China and Africa in terms of the commerce, so as to benefit the African people and benefit the Chinese people, so that the Chinese people can have the access to the fresh African products. We know that the agricultural product access is a job that involves inspection and quarantine logistics, trade, and many other aspects. Since last year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Commerce, together with other relevant departments, have been vigorously promoting the Green Channel for African agri-products to be exported to China. The Customs Department has developed some very practical and useful measures to put the Green Channel into practice, including giving priority to applications for agri-products access from African countries, combining risk assessment for agri-products from the same country with similar processing process or from different countries with the same type of agricultural products and the premise of the risk control, and combining risk assessment for agricultures from agricultural products from African countries that have been granted access to enterprises. And they adopt flexible methods such as field inspection and document review to speed up the assessment and registration, etc. We hope that all entrepreneurs and friends can seize the opportunity to give full play to the role of bridging the gap between, bridging the connection for the trade between China and Africa, so that we can have a better results from such kind of cooperation, as the government and relevant regulatory authority would like to give this great access to this great product so as to promote your growth. And for this report, some agricultural cooperation has been mentioned. But for the main grain production, and I think this main grain product and some food, I think this part can be included into the report, especially the food security. Since the outbreak of the Ukraine crisis, Europe has been suffering from the food security. In 2016, as the ambassador in Sierra Leone, and at that moment, I realized that African continent should be playing its role in producing the crops. And at that moment, we have never expected the Ukraine crisis. And I believe that Europe should tackle the food security problems. So I believe that we should take actions to address the food security to prevent such a problem from happening again. And I know that a lot of ambassadors from African countries are present here, and I really call for African governments should introduce more powerful and preferential policies to do the farming on the main crops and food, and the Chinese government will give further support. And actually, many Chinese enterprises have carried out the grain production in the African continent, such as some SOEs and some famous private enterprises. And I think that we should have taken the action faster. Perhaps we can prevent such a food security from due to the Ukraine crisis. And ladies and gentlemen, friends, this year is the beginning of another implementation cycle of the outcomes of the FOCAC. Last week, Mr. Wang Yi, State Council and Foreign Minister, chaired a meeting of the coordinators for the implementation of the forum outcomes, at which China and Africa exchanged the views and reached important consensus on further promoting the implementation of cooperation initiatives and deepening our friendship and cooperation. At a time when the international situation is changing and global challenges are emerging, China and Africa are making a strong voice of the times for friendship and cooperation and promoting the growth together, setting an example for building a community with a shared future for mankind. And I believe in the future, we should make joint efforts and continue to promote mutually win-win cooperation between China and Africa. And first, I think we should strengthen the construction of China-Africa industry chain, supply chain cooperation platform, build upgrade a number of new economic and trade cooperation zones in Africa, build a good pioneer zone for in-depth China-Africa economic and trade cooperation, and the BRI Cooperation Industrial Park, and support the China-Africa enterprises to carry out upstream, midstream, and downstream cooperation, and especially for some Congo and Zambia, some other countries, we should carry out the further cooperation. And we see that we also need to promote infrastructure interconnection, prioritize cooperation in new areas such as digital economy, smart cities, and 5G technologies, so that we can better software and hardware support for the China-Africa supply chain cooperation. And we also need to promote cooperation in the field of China-Africa logistics and promote the work efficiency between China and Africa in terms of quarantine and other relevant departments. And the report provides advice and suggestions on China-Africa cooperation from the perspective of the people and the private sector. The report by the CBC last year attracted a lot of attention, and it was very successful. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you for our work. And all of the ambassadors have contributed a lot to the report, and I'd like to thank you again. And I hope that this program will continue in the future, and this will become a serious report, and it will become a brand. The report has put forward some policy recommendations, and colleagues from the Ministry of Commerce and all colleagues and from both China and Africa have made a lot of efforts. And I believe that with the joint efforts of the Chinese government and all parties involved in this regard, China-Africa mutually beneficial and women cooperation will further improve quality and efficiency, and we can come up with a market-oriented and refined path of sustainable growth, maintain the stability of the global industrial chain and supply chain, and promote recovery and growth of the post-pandemic African, Chinese, and world economies. Thank you.
Thanks, Excellency Wu Peng, for your insightful remarks. As mentioned earlier, the supply chain development in Africa is not only essential to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also to the African Union's Agenda 2063. This afternoon, we're also pleased to be joined by His Excellency Ambassador Ramtala Osman, who is the African Union China Office Permanent Representative, to share his remarks. Please welcome Ambassador Osman.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Allow me to begin by expressing my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the organizers of this event, the China-Africa Business Council, for the invitation to speak on this auspicious occasion. It gives me immense pleasure and a great sense of pride to participate in the Africa-China cooperation for the supply, from a supply China perspective. It is said throughout the African continent that many hands make light work, and I find this proverb to be as pertinent today's celebration as it is Africa's supply chains. The fact is, the state and future of Africa's partnership well beyond our borders. The Africa of the 20th century is a very different Africa. It is a new and more confident Africa. To put this into context, let us think about the numbers. Africa's population of 1.3 billion people will rise to reach 2.6 billion by 2050. With the youngest population in the world, 70% under the age of 30. Africa is set to drive the global labor market, as it is young people impact the world with creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. The growing population makes it an ideal market for supply chain investment by estimating that the African continent will have a market with 1.7 billion by 2030. Indeed, such a significant number of young people is an opportunity for the continent's growth, especially since, with the aid of technology and innovation, Africa's youth will offer a reliable and sustainable basis for developing low-cost manufactured goods to the rest of the world, including China. Africa's economies are showing strong performance, with at least 5 of the fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you can feel the impact of Africa's supply chain growth right here in Beijing. By 2021, China's trade with Africa had increased 20-fold, and its investment stock in Africa had grown 100-fold compared to 2000. China has been Africa's largest trading partner country since 2009. A large number of infrastructure projects have been completed and have benefited millions of people. More than 3,800 Chinese enterprises have made investments in Africa, and dozens of China-Africa Economic Cooperation zones and industrial parks have been developed across the continent. All of this has contributed to China-Africa cooperation in supply chain development. Africa and China have strong historical trading and cultural ties. It is these ties that give investors from China a head start with Africa. Africa is home to 43 out of 147 members of the Belt and Road Initiative. Today, many of them are huge markets brimming with enormous investment opportunities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, what does this all mean for Africa's ambition of achieving Agenda 2063? The element of Africa's supply chain is seen as key in supporting the African Union towards achieving the key goals and aspirations of Agenda 2063. The AU has the ambition to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency further by constantly adjusting its operations to the evolving needs of the African citizens and driving the continent's integration and the institutional reform process. A prerequisite for organization capacity and the systems and enhancement is required to support it. Both FOCAC and Belt and Road initiatives are closely aligned with the Africa's development blueprint and strategies, including Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area. To achieve the goals of the Agenda 2063 and the Africa Free Trade Area, supply chain development is critical, and FOCAC and Belt and Road have the potential to upgrade the 5 supply chain drivers mentioned in Chapter 1. Deeper Belt and Road Initiative and Africa Free Trade Area cooperation between China and African countries will play an important role in building a more integrated African continent, as well as connecting Africa to global supply chains. This pandemic has highlighted the critical need for governments to work not only with each other, but with all stakeholders, particularly the business sector and broader civil society. In the coming months and years ahead, trade policy decisions as well as the economic policy choices, will determine to a large extent the pace of economic growth and recovery. It is said it takes a village to raise a child. In this case, it will take the African continent and its development partners to raise Africa's supply chain to new heights and levels. Let us make the most of the opportunity. Once again, I should like to thank our host for putting this together. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Osman. The report has also received a lot of support from the Ministry of Commerce. So please help me welcome Mr. Wang Dong, who is the Deputy Director General of the Western Asian and African Region Department at the Ministry of Commerce of China. Please welcome Mr. Wang Dong.
Distinguished Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here to share something about the topic of the cooperation between Africa and China from the perspective of the supply chain development. So first of all, I want to give my welcome and the celebration to the launching ceremony of today's report of the 2022. As give my thanks to the support from relevant stakeholders from around the world. So I think today's event is a very good opportunity for promote our mutual cooperation in the future. I think at the same time, it's the better choice for the relevant market players to play a more significant role in this field and embrace a better future, especially against the background of the down round of the economy. But I think it's in the future we will face a better scenario in terms of the economic development. So against this kind of the background or under this kind of circumstances, to most developments of the economy in a sustainable way, especially in terms of the recovery scenarios and the cooperation with the relevant organizations in terms of the economic. So according to the World Bank's statistics, this year's the performance of the economic continent will have a great success or progress in this year. So we are glad to see that the integration of the continent of Africa has achieved great progress in recent years, as about 90% of the relevant stakeholders has achieved a consensus in its field, especially about the development of the economy in the continent. And with the more and more market players played a more significant roles in this field, with the development and the establishment of the relevant platforms to promote the trade cooperation as the other sectors of the economy. At the same time, we have to see that the prosperity as the developments in terms of the digital economy developments, such as Nigeria, as the other countries in Africa, to develop this kind of the e-commerce platform, especially online platforms, such as the relevant branches established in the African countries, as the relevant trade offices in Africa, as the relevant organizations has been completed and established, and the achieved disintegration with the relevant international organizations. In the last year's November, we have held the relevant ministerial level meetings between Africa and China. As during the meeting, President Xi Jinping had proposed the further cooperation of Africa as China, especially in the future. With this means, in the coming near future, we will pay more attention to the cooperation between Africa and China. So I think it's the key cooperation scenarios for us to work in the future. So during the meeting, with the cooperation between the relevant stakeholders as the players in this game, we have achieved great progress, and with a large amount of the batches of the cooperation project campaigns as the established in the relevant targeted regions. So from this perspective, we have seen that we have promoted the mutual compliance in terms of economic developments in the future as a relevant understanding performance of the relevant market players in this field, and reaching the record high and during this period, especially in terms of the speed and pace, which is higher than that of the rest of the sectors of the economy. At the same time, as the forest volumes of exports and imports from Africa has to rise by about 1.9%. as the relevant fruits from the Western countries, such as the pears, as the other kinds of the fruits and avocados, as the beans, and etc., has been raised the licenses to be exported to China. I think it's a good choice as good news for the relevant market players and stakeholders in this field, especially crucial to the future development, especially in terms of the mutual cooperation between China and Africa. And we are glad to see that the relevant progress has been achieved in its field, and this wins the better and robust performance by its relevant market players, as they reached about the around $30.6 billion in its field. So, and for in other sectors and economies, such as automobiles, as the other necessities in people's daily lives has reached a record high. For example, the spare parts of the automobiles imported from several countries has realized the great performance in this field. So from the perspective of investment in Africa, we have confidence in the future, especially in terms of the supply chain developments. So against the background of the increase of the interest by the developed countries, especially in the Western countries, we have realized the more volume of the investment in African countries against the trend of 1.5%. Say as the investment in the Ethiopia, as the Anglo and the Central, as the of the African continent, as more than the 100 million RMB investment in the direct way. So I think the resources as the environment is very attractive for relevant market players, especially from China, especially for the sectors from the human appliances. I think it is conducive to the promotion of the livelihood levels, and at the same time, it is helpful to expand the employment rates. So I think the private sectors is a very important key areas to promote the mutual cooperation between Africa and China, especially for the relevant kinds of market players in South Africa. As we have known that the relevant enterprises have invested deeply in the relevant regions of African continent and have realized the great progress and performance in its field and expanded the relevant scope in terms of the investment in recent years, especially in terms of the great manufacturing as communications and etc. As I know that the relevant communications has expanded and improved their skills in terms of the investment, at the same time to contribute to the development of the African continent in terms of the expansion of the employment as the pulling people out of poverty in the local regions. So I suggest in the later stages of development, the relevant market players will better integrate it into the local areas, especially to customize to the local demands of the local people, especially across the continents of Africa, in line with the regulations and the laws in the local areas. So at the second, we have to better improve our management systems to in line with the relevant regulations and the laws in the local areas as the provider of better services for the customers in the local regions. And the third, I think it is also important to promote the cooperation between among enterprises in this field, among the relevant market players from the Africa and China. As the fourth, we have to invest deeply into the regions in Africa based on the good basis, such as the relevant alignment in this field. I hope more and more players in this game will invest in this field in the future as to benefit the peoples in the African continent. So next, I think the Ministry of Commerce will pay more attention to these developments in the future, as there is more concrete measures to promote the investment, especially to help relevant market players to invest deeply and more in African continents, and at the same time with the help of the relevant commercial organizations for this purpose, as they provide a better platform for the mutual cooperation between Africa and China in the future, as to realize the better and high quality cooperation in the future, especially in terms of the supply chain developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang Dong. Now, the exciting time everyone has hopefully been waiting for and expecting has come. We are about to launch the report officially. Once again, as mentioned earlier, this report is one of the outcomes of the FOCAC Action Plan 2022 and 2024, where it was indicated that China will publish a report on Chinese investment in Africa on a regular basis. While the first report focused on the role of the market and the power of the private sector, this year's focus is on Africa's supply chain development. And on the screen, we have two QR codes. I want to bring your attention to the screen. The left one is the live streaming, so everything is being streamed live at the moment. It also has a download link for the report currently available in English and French. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code on the left. And on the right side are photos that are being taken at the moment. Feel free to scan. All right, so now we're going to invite our distinguished guests sitting on the front row to please come on stage. Excellency, ambassadors, government officials, please feel free to come on stage.
Place the distinguished guest in the first row to the stage. Thank you. As the distinguished guest to attend the events of the launching ceremony of the report 2022.
In a moment, we're going to invite everyone to place their hand, the right hand, on the button. And on the count of 3, we're all going to count together before the official launching of the ceremony. My colleague Suki, please go ahead.
请各位领导把手放在灯柱上。
Okay, we're all going to count together from 3 to 1. Are you guys ready? 3, 2, 1, let's go. And this is the official launching of the report on Chinese investment in Africa, China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective. Please remain at the front. Thank you very much. Please remain at the front for a very quick photo. A quick photo is being taken. All right, we'll invite everyone to maybe regroup.
稍聚，我们合影。
Thank you all again. Some technical adjustments. Excellent. You may feel free to get back to your seats.
感谢各位领导，请各位回到嘉宾席就坐。
All right. Next, as mentioned in our brief presentation, the report features profiles and case studies that demonstrate how Chinese businesses are developing Africa's supply chain across the 5 pillars of the ecosystem. We wanted to take the time to recognize the member companies that were willing to open their doors and let us access to their information and analyze their operations to date. I will now turn over to my colleague Xue Wei to invite the participants on stage for an award certificate.
有请捷龙集团。
Now please welcome the Jielong Company, 石飞 Company, and all of the company representatives, Hangzhou Chief Technology Company, Shanghai Great Chain, China Wanxin, and Zhejiang Africa Service Center. Please come to the stage. Please stand on the stage. Now we will invite Ms. Sun Hongyu and Wang Jianji to give the certificates to these excellent enterprises. Sun Hongyu, the Vice Chairman of CBC, Wang Jianji, the Institute of the Supply Chain, the head of the Supply Chain Institute. Congratulations to all of you and all of these enterprises representatives and Mr. Wang. And please be on the stage and we will have a photo together. Photo time. Thank you all. Please be seated.
We're very grateful for the support of our member companies. Following this, we'll enter into another series of speeches. We'll enter into another series of speeches, which are reflections and insights from scholars and practitioners, both in person and online. Joining us first is Mr. Tang Xiaoyang, who is a director and professor of the Department of International Relations at Tsinghua University. Please, Mr. Tang, welcome.
And I feel very honored to attend this launching ceremony. Distinguished ambassadors and your excellencies and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And my theme is about the dilemma of value chain and China-Africa industrial cooperation. And how to tackle this dilemma is quite important. And for the value chain production, how to build a synergy among the upstream, middle stream, and downstream is quite important. For the value chain production, if the upstream cannot do a great work, and the midstream and downstream cannot do an excellent work. So this will be a dilemma, and this will be not a very good result. So as to make this smooth cooperation, we have to figure out a solution for this dilemma. And it's also a dilemma for a lot of cooperation between China and African enterprises. So such a coordination and synergy is quite important. And you see the infrastructure, governance, and security all are important aspects within the industrial, within this box. And we see that the industrial investments, supporting industries and the local workers, and productivity and technologies, all of these are included into this whole box or within this cycle. And I'd like to discuss the cycle, the virtual circulation within the industrial chain. The local workers, the technology improvement, and all of these relevant aspects should be enhanced in a great way. And we know that some tax-free policies and tax reduction and some low labor cost from the African continent a lot of advantages should be further improved, should be further taken advantage of. And you see, take Ethiopia, for example, and we see that the leather product sector is quite famous, but the value added cannot be improved. So this will be an industrial problem. And when these raw materials are shifted into the factory, and see this leather should be further processed. And at the moment, the raw materials, when they are processed, the storage and the production process should be refined, and the delivery period will be postponed, and the further products cannot be produced. If the high quality leather bag and shoes cannot be made, this leather factory cannot be developed better, because they don't know what the real needs from the downstream market. And such a consumer and demands will drive the production of the raw materials. So from the upstream to the downstream, a lot of information cannot be exchanged. The market is in disconnection. And for this leather bag, and we see a lot of attachments. And if this whole industrial chain cannot be smoothed, the whole market scale cannot be enhanced. And such a market scale will boost the growth of the factory. For both China and the African continent, we see such a disconnection for this value chain. In Africa, there are a lot of rich resources and low cost labor cost. But the lacks this manufacturing processing capability. A lot of African raw materials are shipped to the Asia, and after this processing, these half-made products and are shipped to China to make further products like the shoes and the bags. But for this whole chain, we see such a very time-consuming effort contributed here, like the logistics and other costs. That's why we can only see the low-cost labor, but very high cost in terms of the technology transfer. So if we can localize in the African continent in terms of the whole industrial chain, it will be great. And you see, this is how to build the local linkages. Take the Ghana, for example, a case study, how to enhance such a local linkages for the industrial chain. And this is a plastic recycling sector. In 2007, a Chinese enterprise set this factory, set its office in the Ghana. And in the next 3 to 5 years, from one company, one sub-company to 10 plus companies. And you can also see some local competitors. And in the meanwhile, such a plastic recycling sector become a very big sector due to the entry of this Chinese company. And this plastic recycling sector is focused on the local needs, from the raw materials to the high-end, to the terminal end products like the plastic bag. So this is a local targeted product. This means this company is deeply rooted in the local market. Local suppliers, and local production, and local recycling, and local plastic bags. And you see the local workers' skills can be enhanced meanwhile. So such a supply chain is not very difficult to be built. And the local suppliers can learn these simple technologies. That's why they can be joined in this plastic recycling sector. As time goes by, they accumulate their experiences and their capabilities and their skills so that they can build a very good industrial chain here. So for this example, this case study, and we must targeting at the local market. If we just focus on the international market, in spite of the huge demands from the globe, but the whole market have high requirements on the quality and the delivery time. But in terms of the case of African continent, they cannot meet the high demands, the high requirements of the global market. So that's why we need to be focused on the local market or the regional market. Let's say the FTA in the African continent. So this will be a great opportunity for the local industries to have their capability to grow their market, to grow their own sectors. They must have their own advantages.
So from the China as the other countries in the Asia regions, we can export the relevant equipment and the materials to the targeted regions to help them to promote their development in this field. As according to the statistics, under my desks, I have noticed that the relevant progress has been achieved in this field, especially in terms of the clothes, as the paper producing, as manufacturing, as the other sectors of the economy has been established relevant at the stages, especially in terms of development of the supply chain in local regions. So this is the picture showing the relevance of the piles manufacturers or the ceramics in the local regions in the Nigeria, which then showing the relevant impacts of the local market targeted investments. So we can see relevance the investment as the number of the 100 million US dollars as the employees, the hundreds of the employees. So this means to meet the demands of the local customers without the importing relevant materials as the facilities from the other countries, which means to help the local customers enterprises to save a lot of money. And which is kind of approaches is the cost efficient at the same time. At the same time, this kind of the practices is conducive to the development for the surrounding areas as the countries. So I think it is to choose the very similar factories in the Ethiopia and in the African regions. So please look at the slide showing information about the collaboration between domestic markets as industrial investments in this field to promote the supply chain development in Africa. So let's look at the domestic demand. So according to the nowadays data, which is often ignored by relevant researchers and the professionals in this field. So we can often see that the relevant professionals in the field often pay attention to the other kinds of the issues in this field instead of this What I mean is the domestic demand. So as for the promotion of the establishment and development of the supply chain in Africa, we should pay attention to the domestic demands, especially pay attention to the differences of the relevant demands and conditions in the local areas, and then to the next stage of the manufacturing investment. So at the stages of development, what it means to promote the investment, as to improve the quality of the investment, as to promote the efficiency in this field, to help as to transform the relevant patterns of the manufacturing and production in local areas, as to meet the local demands of markets, such as in the recycling of the plastic products and etc. So thereby to encourages the economy as a whole in the local areas, especially as the accumulation of the capitals during the same time to promote a balanced development pattern. So this is the general picture about from the upstream to downstream development pattern. So this is the end of my topic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tong, for very in-depth presentation. Next, we'll welcome Her Excellency Mary Mutoni Gichohi. She's the Ambassador of Kenya to China. Please welcome Her Excellency.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Mr. Wang Xiong, forgive me, the Vice Chairman of the Secretary General of the China-Africa Business Council, Mr. Wu Peng, Director General of the Department of African Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and People's Republic of China, His Excellency Randra Osman, the permanent representative of the UN to African Union to China, Mr. Wang Dong, Deputy Director General of Western Asia at the African Regional Department, Ministry of Commerce, fellow diplomats, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored and delighted to join you in this very important ceremony as you launch the report by the China-Africa Business Council on Chinese investments in Africa, with specific focus on China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective. I wish to begin by conveying my appreciation to the leadership of the Council and the organizers of this event for extending an invitation to the Embassy of the Republic of Kenya to attend this event and speak on the theme of China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective and imports of African goods to China. Ladies and gentlemen, with the establishment of the Forum for Africa, China-Africa Cooperation FOCAC, we have witnessed an accelerated and pragmatic engagements between African countries and the People's Republic of China, as demonstrated by increasing volumes of trade over the years. These enhanced engagements have further given rise to deeper and wider economic, trade and investment cooperation at various levels, government to government, business to business, government to business, and more importantly, people to people cultural exchanges. Kenya appreciates the new innovations which come with renewed efforts to strengthen the cooperation between African countries and China, with a view to increasing trade and investments between the two regions, both in terms of values and volumes. Without having to restate the findings of the report that has been presented to us, we understand that exports from African countries into China are faced with a number of supply side challenges, which have been highlighted in the report and are very well done by the speaker before me. The requirement, therefore, of a well-defined, efficient, and fully functioning supply chain in African countries is a matter we must address as a priority if we are to increase the trade volumes and values and shift the balance of trade to the desired positions for our individual countries and collectively as Africa. Kenya has continued to put tremendous efforts to address the challenges hampering the efficiency and effectiveness of our supply chains through investments in physical and technological infrastructure, human and institutional capital, capacity development, and policy restructuring. This is aimed at creating an enabling environment for investments, coupled with favorable incentives, which include the establishment of EPZs and the special economic zones in our various diverse sectors of economy for better integration of the local supply chains into the global value chains. Our efforts have also been significantly boosted by strong and effective cooperation and collaboration from our like-minded development partners, and the biggest of them being the People's Republic of China. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate that the report of the Africa-China Business Council has highlighted 5 crucial key drivers of the supply chain ecosystem that we, the African governments, our development partners, private sector practitioners, and other players in supply chain arena need to critically focus on. And this, they have been told their production, inventory, location, transport, and information. We appreciate that a great number of Chinese companies and enterprises have contributed and invested in each of these pillars in varying degrees. In roads, for example, in Kenya, railways like the SGR in Kenya, the sea, where the turnaround time for ships right now at the port is less than 72 hours, coming from a high of 2 weeks. The airports, renewable energy, mining, agro-processing, and manufacturing, information and communications technology, thereby helping to improve the supply chains in the African countries. We continue to invite more Chinese companies to invest in the 5 pillars of the supply chain in our country to strengthen those already doing well and improve those that are lagging behind in order to create a sustainable and seamless flow of trade along the value chains, which will boost our economy and also create jobs for Kenyans. In our efforts to continuously engage on all possible fronts, diplomatic, economic, trade, and cultural exchanges, it is my desire that we shall have a well-defined, result-oriented cooperation based on the principle of mutual respect, understanding of our needs and aspirations as partners. This way, we shall be able to celebrate together all the big and the small wins resulting from the joint efforts in strengthening our supply chains. Ladies and gentlemen, the China-Africa Cooperation Vision 2035, released during the 8th Ministerial FOCAP Conference held in Dakar, Senegal in 2021, committed to taking a solid step toward building a China-Africa community with a shared future in the new era. As one of the commitments under the vision, China committed to supporting Africa to increase its export capacity to China by strengthening cooperation with African countries in the areas of inspection and quarantine of agricultural produce. And it also committed to actually import up to $300 billion worth of products from Africa. As an early affirmation of this commitment, Kenya and China signed an export agreement for fresh avocado shipment in January this year. Kenya is the largest avocado producer in Africa and the 6th largest producer in the world, and avocado is mainly grown by small shareholder farmers in Kenya. With the joint cooperation and coordination between Kenya and China, it only took half a year, 6 months, from the signing of the agreement to the actual exports. And today, we celebrate, as has been announced by His Excellency DG Wu Peng, we celebrate the great milestone of the entry of the fresh avocados from Kenya into the Chinese market. And it will be my singular pleasure and honor to participate in the handover of the first batch of avocados from Africa in the very next session in this event. Kenya is the first African country to export fresh avocado to China, and it is estimated with the size of the Chinese market, the exports could account to up to 40% of the Kenya's total avocado output. This will address the trade deficit between Kenya and China, increase Kenya's foreign exchange earnings, and boost the local economy by greatly improving the incomes of the local shareholder farmers. As I said, most of the avocados are grown by small shareholder farmers. I would like, therefore, to sincerely thank the Kenya Ministries of Trade and Agriculture, with special mention of the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Services, KEFIS, and I do believe the director is going to speak in the next session, the China Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Commerce, the General Administration of Customs of China, and the business community. And I would like to mention Green Chain. And finally, the Chinese Embassy in Kenya for championing and facilitating the process. I once again congratulate the China-Africa Business Council and everyone involved in the successful launch of the report. And our country will review the report and especially the recommendations to address the challenges where Africa faces in the supply chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. We owe the successful completion of this report to the outstanding hard work of Development Reimagined team that has been willing to collaborate with us on this report. Development Reimagined has done an excellent job at hearing and understanding CABC's vision and wishes, while adding an important and essential perspective from the African side. We are honored this afternoon to be joined by Mrs. Hannah Ryder, CEO of Development Reimagined, joining us from the UK. Please welcome. Good morning, Hannah.
Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, African ambassadors to China, the China-Africa Business Council, and many guests. It is my honor to join and speak at this event as the CEO of Development Reimagined, with the first Kenyan wholly foreign-owned enterprise in Beijing and the first African member of the China-Africa Business Council. So it is a very great pleasure to also follow a speech by Her Excellency Gichohi, the Ambassador to Kenya. Thank you very much. First of all, let me express on behalf of my colleagues at Development Reimagined our huge appreciation to the China-Africa Business Council for not only convening this important meeting and for the great vision that they had in creating this report and the smooth work that we did together on the report. It truly was our honor to be invited to work on it together. When it comes to Africa's supply chains, the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, is extremely pertinent. As His Excellency Osman made clear in his speech, the state and future of Africa's supply chains is not just a matter for African countries. Africa's supply chains are also a matter for our partnerships and what we can ultimately deliver across the globe. That's why this report, China-Africa Cooperation from a Supply Chain Perspective, is a unique, innovative, and crucial read, not only by Chinese stakeholders, but also other international partners who are looking to determine how best to support African countries to develop, to grow, and to reduce poverty. Specifically, I want to share 4 key insights which the report offers, which I hope we can all reflect on. First, the report explains the challenges facing Africa's supply chains in a historically accurate manner. Most of the reports that we read about Africa's supply chains, for example, leave out the fact that supply chain patterns were heavily impacted by practices such as slavery and colonialism. Of course, these practices are now illegal, but their impact still looms through externally facing infrastructure and low value-added trade patterns. To give a concrete example, one of Africa's largest countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, has a so-called national route across the country and into the capital city, Kinshasa, that requires unloading and loading of goods 8 times, from the rail to waterways to roads and so on. This makes logistics extremely difficult. Almost all of the Africa maps which you will see in the report, whether it's road, rail, digital connectivity, all of them have the same feature. The logistics is mostly concentrated on the borders of the continent, not across or between countries. This report makes clear that these patterns, which Africans must work globally to disrupt, have as much impact on Africa's supply chain challenges, including those still being experienced today because of a result of COVID-19 virus and the Russia-Ukraine war. These are just as important as the aspects of doing business on the continent, which Africans can directly control. This contextualized understanding makes this report essential because it helps us to fully understand the scale of the challenges ahead. It makes clear that changing supply chains will not be easy. Second, the report identifies the key trends and drivers in China and Africa cooperation around supply chains. And it goes to the heart of why Chinese partners cannot be impartial or passive when it comes to engaging in Africa's supply chains. The report includes examples of Chinese firms which have already been pioneers and first movers in this way. I cannot mention all of them. They were earlier here in the ceremony. And I hope that you will go and read their excellent stories. Indeed, the report makes clear that China's own development is intertwined with the success of Africa's supply chains. If Africa's supply chains remain as poor as the report explains, Chinese manufacturing will be unable to go abroad, unable to offshore to African countries where they can take advantage of low-cost, young and energetic labor, which His Excellency Wu Peng referred to. Chinese firms will be unable to make the most of Africa's consumer markets, and the global cost of consumption will increase. In this way, the report clarifies a new key reciprocity: why African partners must engage China in cooperation on supply chains, and why the rest of the world has an interest in this. It is to keep the cost of consumption low. We must, as Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, is cited at the beginning of the report in saying, we must secure Africa's prosperity for years to come. The entire world has an interest in doing so. Third, the report centers African development plans and visions. The report correctly identifies that through the African Union, Africans have reimagined Africa's place in the world. There is no need for anyone else to create a vision for Africa. Our development partners, like China, simply need to work with us, reimagine with us as Africans. At the same time, Africans can learn from others, as well as others can learn from us. And China is very crucial in this regard, with multiple similarities as well as differences. We have similarities in our path to development. We have similarities, for example, in how we manage our informal sectors. But we also have significant differences. Across the continent, we have just 46 large airports. China has over 30. Africa's landmass is almost 4 times larger than China. If any partner understands logistical improvements and needs in Africa, it is China. And that's why I believe it is also exemplary that the report has been written as a partnership between a Chinese-led organization and an African-led organization. As the report consistently emphasizes, and especially through the case studies and the recommendation, real partnership at the local level is crucial for success as well as innovation. Fourth and finally, ladies and gentlemen, while this report includes numerous excellent case studies of private Chinese companies and the contributions that they have made, as well as the recommendations for what they and more Chinese companies interested in investing in Africa can do, it also highlights that far from signaling a move away from large-scale infrastructure support from China, It clarifies that infrastructure deficits, especially across the regions, remain huge and necessary to plug. For the Chinese private sector to be most effective and efficient when they do invest, continued large-scale support is needed, including through concessional loans, and therefore suggesting that this policy should continue despite claims of debt crisis in African countries. As my colleagues and I constantly say, African countries have a too little debt crisis, not a too much debt crisis. And we encourage all Chinese and other development stakeholders to provide more support to continuing to fill these gaps, which will contribute to the development of Africa's supply chains. And as I mentioned, the prosperity of not just Africa, but the entire world. So for these reasons, I want to congratulate CABC, the China-Africa Business Council. I also want to thank with heartfelt thanks to my colleagues at Development Reimagined, some of whom are there in the room with you today, for this timely and unique report. And I believe all guests today and future readers will agree with me. We must not delay in acting now, but we will make the most progress if we work together in a united and holistic way. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again to the China-Africa Business Council.
Thanks to you, Hannah. CABC has appreciated a wonderful partnership with Development Reimagined. On the morning of July 27, a sample batch of 72 kilograms of fresh Kenyan avocados arrived at Shanghai Pudong International Airport, making Kenya the very first African country to export avocados to China. And in honor of this, we have invited Mrs. Lu Cuifeng, who is the president of Shanghai Green Chain Information Science and Technology, to join us and give remarks. Please welcome Ms. Lu.
Distinguished Ambassador Osman, Hashmi, Simon, Alan, and Mary Young, Councillor Livingstone, Honorable Director General Wu Peng, and Wang Dong, General Director General, Vice Minister Liu Lu, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Today, it's a great pleasure to share with you that as a promoter and pioneer of the first batch of the Kenyan avocados exported to China, and our company, through several years of unremitting efforts and with the support from Chinese and Kenyan authorities, has finally achieved the zero breakthrough in the export of African fresh avocados to China. As we all know, the world is in a new stage of turbulence and changes, coupled with the impact of the COVID-19. Global economic recovery is fragile and weak, and the development enterprises is like sailing against the tide. But we can see that the long-term and friendly cooperation between China and Africa has become particularly important. China is the world's largest consumer market, and the consumer demand for high-quality products is growing. Africa is a continent with the largest consumer market, largest variety of food crops in the world, and has many natural and high-quality agricultural products. Therefore, investing in Africa, conducting in-depth cooperation between China and Africa in agri-products and bringing more African quality agri-food products to the Chinese market is in the interest of the Chinese and the African people and brings more benefits to them. As President Xi said at the 8th Ministerial Conference of the FOPAC, China will work closely with African countries to implement the 9 programs. China will establish a green channel for African agri-products to be exported to China. As a pioneer in investing in agriculture in Africa, our company has become an innovative whole industrial chain enterprise, covering the largest number of African products and the widest range of countries in China. Through a comprehensive and in-depth cooperation with the industrial associations, suppliers, and governments in African countries, and with a complete global supply chain system, and it has brought high-quality products from many African countries such as Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, South Africa to China. Through a complete global supply chain, we have brought high-quality foods from the above-mentioned African countries. The first International Import Expo was held in Shanghai in 2018. President Kenyatta of Kenya personally led a delegation to participate in it. As an exhibitor at the first expo, Grain Chain, our company, signed a contract with the Kenya Expo Promotion Council to become the preferred partner for Kenya goods to enter the Chinese market, and received strong support from the Ministry of Industry and Trade and other relevant government departments from the Kenya. And we also opened the first communication of Kenya's avocado access. Success can never be done overnight, but it requires a strong and long-term efforts. Through 4 years of unremitting efforts, Grain Chain joined hands with the Chinese Customs Inspection and Quarantine Department, the Kenyan Plant Inspection and Quarantine Bureau, and with the strong assistance and support of the Chinese and Kenyan embassies. This month, the first batch of avocados from Kenya was successfully exported and reached the Chinese market, passing the Chinese customs inspection and quarantine. This makes Kenya the first African country to export fresh avocados to China, and is one of the results of the 9 programs of China-Africa cooperation. On 2nd August, the first batch of Kenya avocados was shipped to China at the Kenya Avocado factory of Grain Chain. Kenya's Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Department Secretary of State Osini, who attended the ceremony, said, by exporting fresh avocados to China, Kenya's foreign exchange earnings will soar and economic dynamism will be unleashed, adding tens of thousands of new jobs. It will boost our economy and benefit key players throughout the avocado value chain, including farmers. The whole value chain will be enhanced. This great initiative underscores our commitment and strong desire to strengthen the friendship and cooperation between Kenya and China, with the aim of enhancing and strengthening the existing economic and trade relations between our 2 countries.
Grain Chain not only as promoters of the Kenya avocado exports to China, and are more positive in avocado cultivation, production, packaging, storage, transportation and preservation technology research and development, as input and investment more in this field of the R&D, and for local farmers as the farmers into more advanced organic farming techniques and plant diseases, as the insect pest prevention as the control technologies. As to existed farms successfully passed its organic certification as the European Union as the free training for local farmers as the farm. As the dual preservation technologies from China and Europe has been introduced in the transportation process, which ensures the best taste and quality of fresh avocados. Good products need good sales channels. So what this means, the Grain Chain with the fresh sales industry heading the prices to join hands in promoting African agricultural products. Kenya fresh avocados next month will be present in the hands of consumers all over the country of China. At the same time, the Grain Chains as green future science and technology tools, the digital supply chain partners gather make African digital supply chain platforms. Through the use of advanced digital technologies, can fully to tracing the relevant cards of the products in its field in terms of transportation to make sure its quality of the relevant fruits. As to construct China-African trade online, chain agents with the creative concept of the TQ come to China and light Osway along the road. Great chains constantly expand African exports of culture as the sideline products categories and increasing investment. In addition to the avocado and its currently assisting many African countries, the introduction of high-quality agricultural products, fruits, meat, aquatic products, we believe that before long, the table of Chinese consumers will meet more and more high-quality African agricultural foods products. At the same time, we hope further reduce the import tariffs on agricultural products between China and South Africa. And we are willing to further deep cooperation with African governments as with their overall accumulated many years of industry experiences and rich channel resources to help African countries to realize more high-quality agricultural food products in terms of the export to China and meet the requirements of the Chinese customs inspection and quarantine and participate in China-African cooperation project. As the future, we will meet the relevant requirements by the competent authorities, especially such as the custom offices, as the relevant government officials, as the branches. So I think it just takes a long way for one to succeed. But I think if we work hand in hand as promotes the mutual benefit in cooperation, we will realize our dreams in the future. So I wish the conference a complete success as the reception ceremony of the first batch of the avocados exported from Kenya to China a complete success. Thank you again.
The successful import of avocados from Kenya to China is indeed a very important step, as significant efforts have gone into boosting imports of products from Africa to China. Therefore, in honor of this, we'd like to take the time to celebrate this step. In a minute, we're going to have a video play, which will be followed by a speech from Dr. Theophilus Mwendwa Muti, who's the Managing Director of Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service.
Give it to me sharply. Don't say for me, oh. Baila mami, oh. I could do this all night long. Don't go, babe. Carry me, they go, babe. Carry over, no, babe. Shade it in the end about you. Don't go, babe. Carry me, they go, babe. Carry over, no, babe. Shade it in the end about you. sọ̀rọ̀, ó balance anito, ojo fumito, ojo panikojo, manikojo, kanitogo, babe, carry me the go, babe, carry overload, babe.
My name is Professor Theophilus Mutui. I'm the Managing Director of Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, KEPHIS. KEPHIS is a state corporation in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperative, whose mandate is to assure the quality of agricultural inputs and produce to promote food security and economic growth. One of our key mandates is phytosanitary, that is, plant health, which includes ensuring that the produce made for exports meet the market requirements. This year, Kenya exported the first batch of fresh avocado fruits to the People's Republic of China. This is a huge milestone, as Kenya is the first African country to export fresh avocado to China. The trial sample of 18 boxes belonging to Sunripe 1976 Limited has led to the opening of the new fresh produce market in China, and we are happy to have played a key role in ensuring that Kenyan avocados have accessed the market through a comprehensive system approach strategy, as well as post-harvest treatment for the management of quarantine pests of concern to China. The trial sample was targeted for verification and is ascertaining that all the laid down requirements for the fresh avocado produce to China have been met and subsequently open up for more commercial consignment later on. At the moment, the China markets opens up a very good opportunity for the Kenyan farmers who can now tap on this lucrative market and earn a livelihood. Ladies and gentlemen, the People's Republic of China is a very important trading partner to the Republic of Kenya. We therefore endeavor to deepen our current relationship and continue to exchange ideas and share best practices to ensure we learn from each other and have positive impact on our individual countries, the African region, and the world at large. As I conclude, I wish to reiterate and assure you of our commitment to undertake the various measures agreed upon between the General Administration of Customs of China, GSCC, and the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, KEPHIS. Thank you.
Thanks to you. So Great Chain, represented by Ms. Liu today, has already shipped avocados from Kenya to China, but they haven't started distributing them yet. They have decided to start today. So in fact, we actually have some fresh Kenyan avocados with us here today. And in a minute, I'm going to invite Mr. Wahuro and Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Zhang to please come on stage. We're transitioning into the handover ceremony at this time.
有请瓦呼鲁参赞吕翠峰女士和张新宇总经理共同上台。有请各位嘉宾。
And as they set themselves up, we're also going to invite the team of witnesses. And the witnesses include Her Excellency Mary Mutoni to also please come on stage. And my colleague is going to call Chinese.
同时有请贺大勇女士、于庆先生、王坚基先生、王小勇先生、王江先生以及郁亮先生、宋玉辉先生、任杰明先生、郑春雨女士上台共同见证，有请各位嘉宾。 同时有请郑军先生，有请各位嘉宾。
You can stand behind the team of 3. So we're about to witness the very first handover of fresh Kenyan avocados in this room. I am now going to invite Mr. Wahura to please hand over the avocados to Mrs. Liu. Symmetry is important. All right. Yes, go ahead. Excellent. Excellent. We're now going to invite the witnesses at the back to please step forward and stand in line for a group photo.
有请各位嘉宾上前一步，我们来照一张大合影。
The avocados can be put on the middle.
好，有请各位嘉宾，我们各位嘉宾稍微站得紧凑一点。来，这边有请。哎，这边我们稍微往这边靠一点。好的。
This is the very first handover of avocados from Kenya to China.
祝贺首批非洲牛油果顺利抵达中国。
May this be the first of many products, not just avocados, but multiple products as well. And may we continue to see the import of even more countries.
回到嘉宾席就坐。
Please return to your seats. Thank you, everyone, for your support. We are now moving into the last segment of today's agenda, which is a panel discussion. The panel's theme is China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective and imports of goods from Africa to China, and will be moderated by Dr. Woyin Adediba, who is currently a research fellow at CDTN think tank. Agriculture, as we've mentioned it multiple times today, is an important pillar of the African economy, accounting for 23% of the total GDP and providing 60% of employment in sub-Saharan Africa. Africa's agribusiness sector holds great potential and is forecast to reach $1 trillion by 2030. The imports of agricultural goods from Africa to China has been an important focus, both on China's and Africa's side. And China is increasingly importing agricultural products and manufacturing goods from Africa. However, our report has found that more investment is needed. The majority of the agriculture industry is made up of small landholders whose individual ability to penetrate international market is limited. And there is also a financing gap in the sector. So we thought today we would combine discussions on supply chain with that of imports of goods from Africa to China. In this discussion, we have invited His Excellency Teshome Toga Chinaka, Ambassador of Ethiopia to China. Please welcome. We also invited His Excellency Alan Chitenta, Ambassador of Malawi to China. Please welcome His Excellency. His Excellency Simon Pierre Adevalande, who is the Ambassador of Benin to China. Please welcome. Yes, find your name and sit accordingly. Mr. Zhang Xinyu, General Manager of Public Affairs Department, Beijing Freshipo Network Technology. Please welcome on stage Mr. Zhang Xinyu. Yeah. And Mr. Fan Jijun, who's the co-CEO of Zhejiang Eurasian Pan-African Network. Please welcome on stage, and we will invite, who is already here, Wo Yin is our moderator for the panel.
And also Dr. Cheng Cheng from AGRA. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Jason. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Sandrine, for the wonderful introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, our distinguished guests online, and those with us here, welcome to this panel. Thank you for joining us. I warmly welcome you all. As Sandrine introduced, we will be discussing the theme of this report, the supply chain cooperation between China and Africa. But most importantly, would want to hear the real life experiences and insights from the people here, because they've all been involved in one way or the other with the China-Africa cooperation, either at the diplomatic level or the entrepreneurs who run on the ground as it were. So this is the focus. Hopefully, by the time we are done, we should have more insights, actionable insights, recommendations, and suggestions for our listeners and guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, distinguished guests, and I'm the moderator of this panel discussion. My name is Wu Yinzhuo.
So because this country has been very successful in its cooperation with China, demonstrably so with industrial parks and other successes recorded, and because the sun rises in the east, I'm going to start with Your Excellency, the ambassador from Ethiopia. My first question is to you, and it is simply, what is it that Ethiopia has done differently than other African countries that has facilitated the successes recorded, especially in if we look at the key drivers, transportation? Ethiopia is an important hub in logistics, air transport, and as well in production with industrial parks, Hawassa, and all this. And so basically, what is it that other governments can emulate so they can replicate your results?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very interesting question. But allow me first to congratulate CIBC for issuing and launching this report. I was in the launching of the first report, and I would like to encourage CIBC to continue issuing a series of reports which are very, very useful for our work. Secondly, allow me to congratulate my neighboring country, Kenya, for its access to Chinese market in terms of their first batch of avocados. We'll be enjoying. I was enjoying Kenya avocado in Europe, and I'm glad now it is in Chinese market. Having said this, I think what did Ethiopia do different than other African countries to attract more Chinese investment? I think the first thing starts defining the right policy, depending on your condition, on your situation. And Ethiopia realized that the best way for us to achieve transformation, growth, development in the country is to assess what is available for Ethiopia, what is at Ethiopia's disposal. So we decided to start with agriculture. And the reason is very obvious. Agriculture contributes 80% of livelihood of our people. 90% of export comes from agriculture, and 47% of agriculture contributes to our foreign currency earning. So GDP, sorry. So it was very, very important for us to start with agriculture. After doing some time actually on investing in agriculture, then we decided to move into manufacturing. And again, that required policy intervention. And with that, we realize that we need foreign direct investment because foreign direct investment brings with it knowledge, technology, finance, managerial capacity, and it creates job, it creates export, and so on and so forth. So we start working with China so that we can attract Chinese investment to Ethiopia. Secondly, with a growing economy, you need infrastructure. And that is where my comment comes actually, because Ethiopia is a huge country and we are a landlocked country. So we need access to the sea. In that regard, it was very, very important for Ethiopia to modernize its logistics infrastructure. And we also worked with China in terms of investing hugely in infrastructure. One good example, which is part of the Belt and Road Initiative, is the Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway and the 14 industrial parks that we are constructing with China. 7 are already operational and 7 are under construction. These are some of the things that we have done differently, I think, and the many brothers from African continent are trying to share from Ethiopian experience. But if I don't have time, then I have a few comments to make at the second round.
You can.
All right. So that is briefly Ethiopia's experience, but I think Africa has done extremely well with cooperation with China. Now, when Sandrine was introducing the report, she talked about China is the largest trading partner with Africa. It's true. China is the 4th largest investor in Africa. It is true. But the fact that we have achieved that level, it still has a structural problem. And let me explain a bit. Now, maybe Africa, with 54 countries, with 1.3 billion population, is the least trading continent with China, despite the fact that we have growth in our trade volume with China. That's one. The second thing, again, we are getting least outbound foreign direct investment from China. Again, 54 countries and 1.3 billion people. That is something that we need to do again more. In the FOCAC program, 9 program, President Xi Jinping has announced it. The 2 areas are very, very critically brought out. Post-COVID recovery will need investment. Post-COVID recovery for Africa will need trade. Now, when it comes to trade, last year we traded about $250 billion with China. That is a tremendous growth. But again, it concentrates with only 7 to 8 countries in Africa. Maybe 70% of that trade volume is with 7 countries, which means that 40-something countries in Africa has very little trade with China. We need to change that. Now, most of our exports to Chinese markets are commodities. And the commodities are exporting. I think it was Professor Tan. He was actually showing a picture that most of African products to Chinese market, to European market is raw materials. Ethiopia has been producing coffee for time immemorial, and we are still exporting raw coffee to Chinese market, raw beans to Chinese market. What does that mean? Let me explain a bit. It means that a recent study clearly showed that a kilo of raw coffee from Ethiopia will fetch for $2. But when processed, that will fetch $40. A recent study published by Ghana Business News indicates that Africa sold $6 billion coffee to global market, but after processing, it was sold for 100 billion. That is how much Africa loses because productivity is low, production is low, and at the same time, we are not adding values to our products. Those are, I think, structural problems, but let me stop there for now.
Thank you, Excellency, for the point and for paying attention to time. Something that struck me, or if I were to summarize what you said, was the strategic path that you followed: agriculture, manufacturing, and then foreign direct investment. And one thing you said that made foreign direct investment attractive is the knowledge transfer of technical know-how and all that. However, there are those who would argue that this really happens, like when foreign direct investment comes, the technology transfer doesn't happen right away, or it takes a while. So this is why I would want to ask the CEO of Erosion, who has been in Africa. They've been operating in Africa for close to a decade and a half now. How has it been? What has been your experience in terms of transferring knowledge, technical know-how to the host countries, and what are the challenges that you've encountered with that? Yes, you.
谢谢。这个首先还是非常感谢我们中非民间商会能够邀请。
Thank you for CBC to invite our company to attend this ceremony. I'm very happy to be with you here, including excellencies, ambassadors, and other enterprises representatives.
进入非洲的一些想法之前呢，我想先介绍一下我们泽世大非。
And I'd like to introduce our company.
2008年
In 2018, we came to Africa. It has been 14 years since the entry of our company into the African continent. And now we have formed a supply chain system. And this will be a real retail network. We have been entering 12 countries, 40 cities. And we have employed 1,000 people, local people. In terms of the service chain capacity, in order to promote the China-African trade. And we have built 500,000 square kilometers warehouse and a lot of logistic vehicles and 55 cross-border trunk line. And 21 partners.
So as the first improvement in terms of the providing better services for the relevant market players, we are paying more attention to the systems in terms of the wholesaling sectors. So nowadays, according to the relevant data and the statistics, we are focusing on the home appliances or the necessities to meet the demands of the ordinary people's daily lives, such as the cosmetics or transportation, etc. So this means nowadays, as for the eastern regions in African continents, including covering the more than 40 cities in that region, we have established the system in terms of the wholesaling business, as they source different means of the franchises, etc. So it means this kind of the system with the wholesaling system as a core to form a kind of network in Africa. It's a kind of strategy for our company to promote the better investment as the further cooperation between China and Africa, especially by the help of the means of the technologies development. So I think it is the future trend or direction is viewed. Thank you. Thank you.
If I summarize what I got there, they run a wholesale model and they've developed franchises, and that's one of the age-old ways of transferring knowledge, especially in marketing and the downstream sector, if you will, in the industry. So thank you for your answer, Fan Zong. So we'll move from the east of Africa to the west now, where I have special interest, if you will. So Your Excellency, Ambassador, Benin is a relatively small country. small but strategic because it is the gateway to much larger neighbors that I know a thing or two about. Now, my question is this. For development partners and Chinese companies here that will be looking to invest in Benin, what is it about Benin Republic that makes it more attractive for that investment as a destination for investment compared to the other larger neighbors?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate the CABC for the report and also thank all the colleagues who are here for this discussion. Let me put it like you say, Benin is a strategic position. We are a French-speaking country, having one of the biggest markets is Nigeria. We are agriculture country. We are the first producer of cotton in West Africa. We are the third producer of cashew nut in Africa. And we are the fourth in pineapple in the country. To be a first in cotton, we use the cotton as a model to build our supply chain from the production to the market. And that gives the opportunity to the country to use that platform to extend to other agricultural products. And also we improve our custom services and our port efficiency. That make in the area our infrastructure and the connection infrastructure more attractive. And we work hardly with Chinese to fund some of those infrastructure. Then today, since 2016, we make a lot of reforms in terms of incentive. Open the industrial zone so that progressively will not allow our product to go raw outside. I'll give you an example from 2024. Benin will not never, after 4 p.m., my English level is low because I'm from French-speaking country. But from 2024, will not allow the country to export raw cashew outside the country. We need to process all our production locally. And progressively, we'll do the same thing for our crops. And like my colleagues, the ambassador of Ethiopia says, exporting the raw product, we're exporting our riches and importing the poverty for the others. We need to stop. And at that level, our partners, the Chinese partners, have a huge opportunity because processing our product is giving them now a new partnership, a new avenue to have the new opportunity on the continent. Those are the things that I say to make our place more attractive. We start to do some examples how to add values to our product, but at the same time, give the opportunity to our investors to bring technology, to bring investments, and then also to do a transfer, expertise transfer. Okay. Finally, allow me to give one more point. Is that I want to advise CABC to start to think about a partnership, institutional partnership in our countries. This report, for instance, is very, very important. I went through the report. It's a tool for decision making, but it remains in the level of the people who have access to it locally here in China and some. We need now to move at another level, to have institutional partnership in our countries so that this report will go to the decision makers inside the country. So there are valuable information in the report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I want to start from your last recommendation because it's quite pertinent. And before when we started this panel, I'd hoped that would get suggestions and recommendations like this. Just to flesh it out, how would you suggest that CABC goes about making this report available to the relevant decision makers at the institutional level?
Thank you very much. I start to discuss with Benin Chamber of Commerce, who is an institution who have a member, a company who are members of the chambers, and then start discussion with the president of the chamber to put them in contact with CABC so that they will start to work together. And the Chamber of Commerce can be the entry door for CABC activities in Benin. They will share information. Sometimes they call the embassy to ask information that we don't have. But if they have this type of relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, who are directly in contact with the company, they will be more efficient. Another point is, today the private sector is getting more efficient in Africa, not the private sector that we know 10, 20 years ago. We start to have champions in the private sectors. Those people need to get in contact now with the Chinese investors. They can reduce, they can share risk, they can share responsibility in the investment that they are making in our country. Those are the things that I want to say.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think the CABC officials are taking note. And I was going to ask, because I suspect that you saw the report before you made your policy recommendations, because one of the key recommendations in the report is that African countries institute policies that will, in quote, force manufacturers to add value, and which is what you've just said, that for instance with cashew, no export of cashew from 2024 unless it is processed and value added. So we would have to ask what happened before we saw the report. Thank you for your answer. Now, I want to first of all congratulate Freshipo, because I'm aware that Freshipo would be distributing the avocados in China. So congratulations for that. And still on the subject, you have the knowledge, the market knowledge, the domestic market knowledge. And there have been several African attempts by Africans to enter this market. What is it that African brands or African entrepreneurs trying to enter the Chinese market need to know about the Chinese consumer using, would appreciate insights from your work with the avocado, the Kenyan or fresh Kenyan avocados?
Thank you for your invitation, as I'm very honored to be here to share my opinions. So I think this is the report 2022 is very important of this kind. I'm the forum as the Public Affairs Department of the Beijing Friendship Network Technology (CLD). So first of all, I want to share some information about our company. Our company is established about since 2010. So it's the responsible for the wholesaling sectors of the business development, as now has established relevant branches in covering 27 cities across China. Which means we have formed relevant business networks across China as the covering the different kinds of categories of the patterns of business to promote the balance and the prosperity of our company. At the same time, of the one key sectors of a business, providing the fresh fruits is the very important sectors. So this means we have to tap into the potential of the resources in this field, especially in sectors of the fresh vegetables from the foreign trainers. So for this purpose, we have established relevant wholesaling systems to find out the high quality fruits, such as the oranges in the South Africa, etc., which is very popular in China. Such as the avocado, as the avocado company is very popular in the Chinese market, as there was the 15 times plus or increase in the past years. So this means we have realized the increase rate as number of 100%. So this kind of data or practices shows the potential of the fresh fruits and very attractive to the Chinese customers. So as the first import of the first batches of the fresh avocados from Kenya, we have the advocacy initiatives to get the information about this business to realize these dreams. At the same time, by paying attention to gets the help from the relevant technologies advancement, such as the big data or the AI technologies to analyze the process practices of the market, to provide better services to the targeted customers, such as in terms of the specifications, quality, the categories of the avocados, as to provide the more high quality and customized services to our customers, especially for the small-sized and medium-sized families across China. At the same time, we have to provide the relevant helpful tips for them in terms of the relevant information about types, also taste of this kind of avocados in illustrations. Thank you. Okay,
follow up on that question. And the question is this: what is one thing that you want African entrepreneurs to know and understand about Chinese consumers? So, for instance, we have a coffee manufacturer in Ethiopia who's trying to get her coffee sold in China. What do you think? If you have to tell her one thing to understand about the Chinese consumer, their preferences, what will that be?
Okay, thank you. As for the market, especially for the customers, it's the relatively tricky question because it's just relatively complex. As for the relevant kind of the fruit, such as the avocados, into the Chinese market, we have to have the relevant considerations at the same time, such as the size and taste, as the purpose, with the use of the avocados to prepare some dishes with it. So I think this kind of considerations we have pay attention to during the real life transactions process. So if we use this kind of the avocados to prepare a salad, we would choose the appropriate kinds of avocados, especially pay attention to the taste of the softness of avocados. And then we will pay attention to the habits in terms of the shopping, such as the some kinds of customers like storing the avocados in their fridges, which just means they often go shopping of the avocados every week, once a week, or once a month, which just means they have to store this kind of beverages in their fridges. So what I want to say is we have to, according to different kinds of the uses and demands of customers.
Thank you. Thank you. I asked for one recommendation, but you gave me several, so I'm very grateful for that. Yes, very generous. Thank you. Now, Your Excellency, Ambassador of Malawi, this is your question. Now, Malawi is a landlocked country, and some people may view this as a disadvantage, but I choose to consider it an opportunity, especially with the focus of, for instance, the AFTA. So I want to know, I'm sure Malawi is thinking to fully utilize the opportunities AFTA is providing. I would like to know, what are the strategies that are being employed? What areas are you looking at? If we consider the drivers of the supply chain.
No, thank you very much for that question. Allow me also to join my brothers in, first of all, congratulating China-Africa Business Council for quite a substantive report. And for me, I think, as you've put it, information is very important. And the involvement of the stakeholders, especially even us as African ambassadors, to give you our opinion in that report, I think enriches the whole report. It does bring me also to a mechanism that we have in Africa, that we called it the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. And I think that's where I also wanted to take it further, that in terms of the future reports, complementing the observation from my brother from Benin, that indeed there is need to involve the chambers of commerce, because then they will be able to share in-depth information and experiences. And in that way, we are also building capacity. To my sister from Kenya, I think for us, we're no longer branding it as Kenya, but it's actually African. We are so proud that today the first avocado batches have arrived. Thank you. Now, going to your question, I totally agree that indeed you have to look at these issues from a positive angle. And positive in the sense, if we sit and say that Malawi is landlocked, then we cannot be able to access the sea and be able to go through the market. We would not do ourselves a favor. The policies that the government of Malawi has put in place includes making sure that indeed we do cooperate with our partners in order for us to have access to the sea. Malawi has neighboring countries in terms of Mozambique, which is mostly to the south and east. And then we've got Zambia and we've got Tanzania in the north. Now, our fastest route to the sea, which is really more cost effective, is the Beira one, which is in Mozambique. But the report has pointed out challenges. You do recall that we've had security issues in the past. It means that accessing the sea in that sense through the sea has also faced challenges. And we've had to be able to cooperate, just like currently we are also facing challenges in terms of security in that area. So we would have to work together. And I think that's what the report is encouraging us to do in terms of regional integration. The African Union is encouraging us to equally partner with other countries so that we encourage cross-border trade. And in that sense, we'll be able to have solutions instead of just looking at ourselves as a landlocked country. I think the other aspect that has been pointed out is that, yes, we may have the policies, but we should also not lose or take our eye off the ball, in the sense that it's the competitiveness we have also to look at in terms of the products. Now, Malawi has, like any other country, is looking at products like soybeans, and we have been in touch with our Chinese counterparts. We've had challenges in terms of the pace at which we are going. You know that the GCCA has got requirements, and some of those requirements are quite technical, but it's phytosanitary requirements that you have to look at. It looks simple when you're from this side, but sitting where I am in Malawi, it's not as simple. Those requirements, for my people to understand them, it's not easy. And those are some of the challenges that we are saying, localize some of the processes, localize some of the procedures. If I had the GCA, for example, building that capacity in Malawi so that we don't have to be asking these questions, but we'll actually be dealing with them, it will make us more efficient, and it will make our products maybe come onto the sea faster than they should have had. But also the side B of it, yes, we can be positive, but also there is a reality, and the reality is indeed that Malawi is a landlocked country. What are the other options we can look at? The report talks about integration in terms of looking at the airspace, for example, so that you have cargo that can be easily transported through air. That we haven't done very well in Africa in terms of utilizing the different modes of transport, air, sea, and land. We've concentrated mostly on the land. And I think looking at the Chinese model, you have to look at all these various aspects to be able to resolve the issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency.
The new concept for landlocked countries, land-linked.
Okay, His Excellency has just said the new concept for landlocked countries is land-linked countries and not locked. And I was going to say that I think, if I may suggest that maybe there's a thing or two to learn from Ethiopia, who has essentially set off the air transport. I mean, they are quite efficient in that. One of the best, definitely one of the best on the continent. And okay, he's corrected me, the best on the continent. So I think there's where we can have one or two exchanges with Ethiopia on that regard, or in that regard. So thank you once more, Your Excellency. Jason, I'm coming for you now. This question is for you. And because you represent agro products, or firms who deal in agro products and try to get those into China. Now, one of the key attributes of FOCAC, the first FOCAC, was the green lane to facilitate African value-added products into China. I want to know, since that's what you specialize in, what has your experience been? Has the lane been actually green and fast? If so, let us know. And what are the challenges you've experienced or you faced in getting African-made value-added goods into China?
Thank you, Boeing. And I want to take this opportunity firstly. Thank you, CABC, and congrats to CABC for the successful launch of this new report. And second of all, I want to congratulate to Ms. Liu for Green Chain and Sunripe for your great work to firstly get avocado from fresh avocado from Africa to China. To your question, Wayne, Agra is not a trading company. Agra is currently the single biggest cross-country investor and facilitator of agriculture in Africa. We value the importance of Chinese market, but our focus is more on the supply side. It's more focused on African smallholders, how to develop, how to increase the productivity of African agriculture. That is our mission. But as the China director for our, as the head of the China program, I do have quite some experience in the past 2 years dealing with agricultural, African agricultural products into China. I think the first of all, it's very important is for Chinese investors, entrepreneurship to understand the importance of African agriculture. If you ever taste Kenya avocado, if you ever taste avocado in Africa, it's absolutely nothing comparable with the avocado you have here in China or avocado you have in America. I'm so sorry for my friends from South America, but I live in Nairobi and I vote for our avocado over there. This is definitely a different thing. And as Ms. Zhang just mentioned, all this orange from South Africa, they're just breathtaking, juicy, and lovely. It brings you the feeling of sun. All these features you're gonna only have to taste from agricultural products from Africa. So those things, I hope Chinese investors pay attention to Africa. And second of all, Sandy mentioned that we need more investment into agriculture in Africa. And come to us, come to AGRF. Every year in September, we have the African Green Revolution Forum, held either in Nairobi or Kigali or Accra in Ghana. Every year, we bring like 2.5 to 3 billion US dollars of investment pumping into Africa agriculture. This year, Ms. Liu's company will join our deal room feature for the AGRF. maybe Ms. Liu will get more finance from our European and North American financiers, from their financial banks, right? So one thing is pay attention to Africa. It's a promising, growing land of hope. Another thing is pay attention to us. And if you need finance, if you need investment, if you need know-how, if you need connections with the government, we'll deal with that. As long as you're committed to support African agricultural growth and you're committed to help the smallholder farmers in Africa. Thank you very much, Wayne.
Okay, thank you, Jason. But I've still got a few questions for you. I like the fact that you talk about the financing and the investment. We just heard from the ambassador from Benin. They've got the best cashew in on the continent, but I think it's second to Nigeria is what would solve that later. Well, my question to you is this. There's a farmer in Cotonou, for instance. He needs access to finance from your company. How would he go about it? Or how should he go about it?
First of all, he will have to start his own startups and look for our local, we call village-based advisors. We have nearly 40,000 village-based agricultural advisors spreading all over Africa. You look for our guy. If it's a big enough village, we'll have our guy over there. You turn to our guy over there and talk to him or her and look for advice. And we're going to promote to the provincial level, then to the national level, and to the AGRF level. And it is highly likely if the cashew is really good. And with our facilitation, not only finance, but also like trading network, like companies like Green Chain, with the help from these partners, maybe those cashew will be able to entering a promising market like China. And I forgot to mention our friends sitting here, no matter it's Nigerian, no matter it's Ethiopian, Benin, Malawi, they are all our member states. And not to mention our lovely ambassador from Kenya is our headquarters where it is in Nairobi. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So I think that's very important. Everybody needs to, the entrepreneurs always need to find the path to money, and Jason has beaten a clear path to finance it. Thank you, Jason. So I've just been informed that we're short on time. So I'm going to ask just one more question. I'll throw that to the ambassadors here because it's a policy-related question. And after that, then if there's any closing remark, any short comment we'd want to make, must be done within 1 minute. So we'll round off in that manner. Do I have everybody's consent? Okay, thank you. So my question has to do with it's a policy question. When Our Excellency was talking, she was speaking earlier, she talked about how it took 6 months from signing the agreement to shipping the avocados down here. That caught my attention. The second thing was, as stated in the report, the tariff was reduced from about 90% to 7%, significant reduction. And I'm aware that this can only be achieved if it is done at a bilateral level. So my question is there any mechanism to bargain collectively as the African Union, or are there bilateral mechanisms to achieve this for various African countries? We can answer from east to west.
My experience is that such a negotiation is done at bilateral level. African Union, of course, we discuss overall continental issues, but when it comes to country level policy interventions, it is done at country level. For instance, we have started negotiating with China to access Chinese market when it comes to meat production. And of course, we are also following the footsteps of Kenya to introduce Ethiopian mango, Ethiopian banana, Ethiopian avocado also, because the Prime Minister has taken a very important steps in terms of exporting fruits and vegetables to a global market. So what you do is you apply, when you are ready, you apply to Chinese customs, then start negotiating. And I think what the report indicated that there is market requirement, and that is the issue. And that is where we want investment. That's where we want technology, because market requirement is not a small. You have to meet the standard, the quality, and as she said, the size is also very important. The quality is very important. So every aspect of your product is very important. So in order to do that, that's why every FOCAC meeting we talk about investment facilitation, trade facilitation. It is not an easy thing. I understand some African countries start negotiating to introduce their meat product. For instance, Botswana and Namibia, it took them 3-4 years. And I think the fact that Kenya achieved this result in 6 months, it's a miracle. And I think it has to do with their work back home, because that's where the actual trick is. If you produce a good quality product that can easily meet the market requirement, then negotiation will be much easier. But if your product does not meet what the consumers in Chinese market need, then there is a problem. That's why actually we want Chinese investors to come to Africa, because they know the taste of the Chinese, they know the Chinese consumers, they know how to process products to the Chinese consumers. And I think this is part of the negotiation. But to answer your question shortly, I think we do it at bilateral level.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So it seems that you've answered for all the other excellencies here. Or would you like to add something, Your Excellency, Ambassador Malawi?
No, I think he has ably answered that.
Okay, fantastic. So in that, on that note, I think we could round off and end the session now. It was a short one, but quite fruitful. First, Jason gave us a path to money, most important element in this supply chain strengthening. We also learned the key things that Benin Republic is doing. So investors who want to go to Benin know that they can confidently go and invest in value addition there. So for me, even these two things, if these are the only things we learned and we got from this, it is quite worth it. And before I forget, we also heard from the Benin ambassador that CABC will do well to communicate these reports and findings to institutional partners. And I think as well, this is an important recommendation. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you, our guests, the ambassadors and the captains of industries who've been here. Thank you for your time. I wish everyone a wonderful evening. Thank you.
We'll invite our panelists to go back to your seats as we get ready to close today's launching ceremony. Thank you, everyone's contribution. So this brings us to the end of today's event. I would like to close with this quote from Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, who is the president of the African Development Bank. Quote, Africa needs quality investments. Africa needs environmentally sustainable investments. Africa needs investment that will build local supply chains and upgrade the skills of its youth and well-trained populations. Africa needs socially responsible investment that empowers and not disempower communities. It must be a win-win investment partnerships. Together we invest, together we prosper. So thank you everyone for participating in the launching ceremony of the report on Chinese investment in Africa, China-Africa cooperation from a supply chain perspective. Thank you for your contribution and attention, both in person and all of you online. Have a good read and a great evening. Thank you. Lastly, would like to just draw your attention that there is a gift from Green Change for those who are sitting in front, so make sure to not leave it behind.